This is Our Changing State, Vote 2024. I'm Matthew Petty. The race for the White House this year has not been an easy one. Supporters of Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump have painted the election of something of an existential crisis, but for very different reasons. And wary voters may be hoping this election will be decided swiftly. But the election doesn't end on Election Day. And here to explain what you can expect as you await the outcome is WUSF News Director Mary Shedden. Mary, in a close election like what we're seeing this year, it can take some time to tally up the votes and declare a winner. In 2020, the winner of the presidential election wasn't declared on election night. Just remind us what happened.
Well, it's complicated, Matt, so I'm just going to lay out a couple of highlights. First of all, November 3rd was Election Day, a Tuesday, just like this year. Now, Pennsylvania did not declare its winner for 4 days. That's because they don't count anything, whether it's early votes, mail-in ballots, anything, until the polls close on Tuesday night. So that Pennsylvania announcement 4 days later, it triggered many states and media organizations like the Associated Press to declare unofficially that Joe Biden won the race. But states like Georgia and Arizona were so close that triggered automatic recounts, and that ended up taking several weeks for them to declare a winner there. And Biden won each state by about 11,000 votes. On January 6th, the traditional and mandatory meeting of Congress gathered, and they gathered to certify the votes from the Electoral College. While we all know about the violence that erupted that day when President Trump's supporters rampaged the Capitol, Congress still certified Joe Biden as the winner.
Okay, so it's a bit complicated. Why aren't we likely to know the winner right away this time?
Matt, like I said, it's complicated. Individual states have their own rules about when to count votes and how to count votes. And like I said, Pennsylvania. So we won't know the answer on election night, and it could be days or weeks.
Mary, what are experts saying about when we might know who won the presidential election?
2 words: be patient. We don't know.
Those are tough words to hear for folks who've been enduring this campaign, though, right?
It's hard for journalists who've been covering it all for years since, we've started the primary season in Iowa almost 2 years ago. This has not been an easy race, but the presidential election's really, really important. And so be patient.
Now, vote count showing one candidate ahead on election night might not reflect who the eventual winner is. Remind us why that is.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics. I've mentioned Pennsylvania, Georgia, other states, but let's use Florida as an example. The official results in Florida are not really there for 14 days. They count their mail-in ballots and early voting. They start that on the Monday before the election. And on Tuesday, individual precincts hold their voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., as we all know. And those precincts have literal boxes of paper tabulations that are brought to the county, the 67 county offices, and they're tabulated. Those boxes can trickle in literally all night long, depending on how far away they are. And then 2 days later starts the process of reviewing provisional and cured ballots. And things like recounts can totally happen. Florida requires a recount when there is 0.5% of the votes are close between the candidates. In 2018, for example, the governor of Florida, the U.S. Senate race, and the commissioner of agriculture races were all that close.
Right, sort of a few thousand votes separating each of those races. We'll remember that. Now, Florida isn't one of the swing states that people are watching closely this year. It's kind of gone from purple to now pretty solidly red by most accounts. When are we going to know who Florida voted for, and what about down-ballot races?
Sure. And so I need to say that while the polls are saying it's not close, we have no idea. That's the beauty of our democracies. We have no idea until each individual voter ballot is counted. And that's the beauty, right? But Florida is pretty quick to get results. We have one small part of our state in the Panhandle is on Central Time. So the state does not start announcing any votes or even putting anything on their website till 8 p.m. on Tuesday night, which is fine. But county level votes, you might start seeing that trickle in starting at 7 p.m. with early votes, mail-in votes and such will start trickling in.
Turnout in presidential election years is higher than other elections. So how many people are expected to vote this year?
Oh, it's pretty impressive, actually. Let's use 2020 as an example. In 2020, in Florida, 11.1 million voters, that's 77% voted. That's pretty impressive. Nationwide, 66% of the electorate voted. And if we look at the 244 million Americans eligible to vote today, that means we could see more than 162 million people deciding this presidential race.
Wow. Mary, you don't have to go too far back into Florida's election history to where this state was the one to watch in presidential elections. So remind us what happened in 2000. Just to set it up, we had Vice President Al Gore running for the office of president. We also had George W. Bush running for that office too. What happened in Florida?
Yes. Well, just several hundred votes separated the two candidates, and it led to not just any recount. It became a recount, especially in Palm Beach County, where literally people from all the parties were looking at the ballots and examining them for things like hanging chads.
Butterfly ballots too, right?
Butterfly ballots. It really fundamentally changed a lot of how ballots look today in the state of Florida, and many of the state's elections offices have opted to go to scanners or automatic machines as opposed to the old school hole punch, because a hanging chad is a pretty easy thing to dispute in the courts.
Right, and ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in and stopped the recount. I mean, it had been the Florida Supreme Court kind of overseeing things, but ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in and said, we're done. This is it. Exactly.
And that was in mid-December of 2000. And it's something that anybody who was in Florida at that time will not forget anytime soon.
Now, there's already legal challenges being filed in this election in 2024. There's likely to be even more to come. What impact could litigation have on when this election gets decided?
I think that's probably the biggest question mark that is out there. We have the official timeline of when votes need to be certified, when electoral college votes need to be turned in, and when they need to be certified. But the fact is, we should expect dozens, if not hundreds, of lawsuits on not just the presidential race, but probably in a lot of closely contested races across the country. That's kind of become a kind of a side market, so to speak, for what elections are about. So the most important thing you probably need to know, other than be patient, is realizing that all those machinations are about the sides fighting. Ultimately, your vote hopefully will be counted clearly, and it will be specific, and it will matter.
Now, after Election Day in 2020, as then President Donald Trump repeatedly challenged the results and made false claims of election fraud, people got probably a much closer look at what happens between Election Day and January 6th than they might normally do. So just kind of remind us about that process that rolls out after Election Day before the new president is sworn in. What are some key dates to keep in mind?
We have the key date, which is Election Day, November 5th. The certificate of assignment of appointment of electors issued. That's basically saying, what did each state decide? The majority of the votes means that the Electoral College voters go to that candidate. That's December 11th. And there will be lawsuits probably in between there. The meeting and the electors will actually vote within their states on December 17th. They have to turn in those votes by December 25th. And then on January 6th, Congress will officially count and certify the electoral votes for President of the United States.
Well, Mary Sheridan, WUSF News Director, thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you for all the great coverage this election season.
You as well. You can find more insights on the election on Our Changing State Vote 2024. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts and watch on YouTube. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you for watching and tuning in. Our Changing State is a production of WUSF. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Scott Wachtler produces the podcast. Videos by Warren Buckholtz and Chandler Bolcom, who also does our graphics. Engineering support from Blake Bass. Jackson Harp composed our theme music. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks for listening.